hat on and actually get you formally.
Start all over again, Greg.
No, I got things to do. Anyway, so the problem is that we have made flowering plants somewhat toxic or unavailable to pollinator bugs, which is usually what we're talking about. We don't talk too much about pollinator birds. And either we put down herbicides or pesticides and kill them through poisons, or we make it too much of a monoculture, and so the entire thing is female plants. This happens often with trees. I'm sorry, male plants. We don't like female trees. Who knew that there were such things as female trees? But if you have a crabapple tree or an elm tree or any other tree in your yard, and it drops a lot of stuff and makes you crazy, be it from acorns to long pea pods or whatever it is, then you got a female plant. And so we tend in urban areas we have tended to plant nothing but male plants. They're much neater, pollen is really small, acorns are really big, etc. And we have monocultured, at least our urban society, with lots and lots and lots of male plants. If your allergies are bad, guess what? It's the pollen that bothers you. That's the male part of the plant. That's what makes you sneeze. And I would argue that's why we have many more people with allergies today than we had 100 years ago, because 100 years ago, I don't think we knew about male and female plants. Olga could certainly kick in about wheat and other large field crops. Many of those crops are not conducive to pollinators. And so anyway, so there are two types of plants that we need to concern ourselves with for pollinator plants. Some are annuals and some are perennials. Here in Minnesota, we have great pollinator plants that are native to our area, that are perennials. Blazing star is one of them, sometimes called a prairie paintbrush, sometimes called purple gay feather, believe it or not. Purple cone flowers, yellow cone flowers, black-eyed Susans, certain species of daisies, and many other plants are native to Minnesota and are great plants for pollinators. And I think Olga once upon a time suggested that if we could only convince farmers to plant 100-foot or 10-foot swath on the average of every field, and instead of putting in wheat seed, they put on that 10-foot swath a native plant, flowering plant seeds, we probably could cure our whole problem with pollinators. People focus on butterflies. And so I noticed John has waffled between, this is the pollinator project versus the butterfly project. And in Minnesota, we almost always concentrate on monarch butterflies. Monarch butterflies are just awesome. I mean, think about those things. They all winter in one small square mile area of Mexico, halfway up the mountains. It's not too cold so they freeze. It's not too warm so they get too hot. They have enough rainfall so they have enough moisture to last through the winter. And they all live there together as a huge congregation. There are no monarch butterflies anywhere in the world except for this congregation of monarchs in the middle of Mexico. Go figure. And not only that, it's in a very inaccessible place. So even people, entomologists couldn't find this place until relatively recently. And then from there, they fly to wherever they're programmed to go. Some go to Minnesota, some go to Maine, some go to California, whatever it is. And it takes 3 generations for them to come up here. Think of that. They come up to Minnesota, they leave probably in mid-March, and it's too cold to come up here, but they can go to, Arizona, and they cross Arizona and they go to Colorado, and it's too cold here in Minnesota for monarchs, but that's just fine there in Colorado. And they come up here, and then 3 generations, they come up here to Minnesota and they plant their eggs. And how they communicate to the next 2 generations to come to Minnesota as opposed to Wisconsin or Maine, I don't know. I don't think any entomologist knows, but they do. And they plant their eggs. And the strange thing about monarchs is they only plant eggs in milkweed. You can plant anything you want, but if it's not milkweed, monarchs don't care. And they plant their next generation in milkweeds. And then that generation, roughly in August, They pop out as a, larvae and all that stuff, pupa, and finally come out as a monarch butterfly. 3 generations from removed from Mexico, and then they head south and go back to the same square miles in Mexico. How they know this, I do not know. Nobody knows, but it's amazing. So if you want to encourage monarchs and only monarchs, you plant lots and lots of milkweed, and you'll get lots and lots of monarch butterflies. But if you only plant milkweed, you're not going to help any other pollinators. So I think if we want to think about pollinator projects, we got to think about overall, not just butterflies, but all sorts of pollinators. In Minnesota, our native and perennial flowering plants generally take 3 years from the day you put the seed in the ground to they first produce flowers to make a pollinator bug happy. So perennials can be very discouraging as seeds for people who are not familiar with pollinator, what a pollinator plant can do. This is why when you go to Bachman's or whatever your garden supplier is, you buy a healthy, growing, preferred plant that's at least 6 inches tall or 10 inches tall. That plant is that, and why does it cost $20-$30? Because it's 3 years old. They've had to nurse it along. That's what they call it, a nursery, up to 3 years. So seeds, in my opinion, now I grow lots of things by seed out here in my garden, but my garden is well established and kind of old. I mean, well, so am I. But then we also have annuals. And annuals, of course, as you can tell by the name, they grow for 1 year. And we have some native annuals here in Minnesota, but almost all the annuals that we plant in Minnesota are not native to Minnesota, but still do a great job in providing flowers for pollinators to go to. I'm thinking about marigolds, zinnias, cosmos, what else? Anyway, there are lots of really, really good pollinator flowers. The two that people plant most often, annuals here in Minnesota, just to make the bees and everybody happy, are I would argue, are zinnias and marigolds. The other advantage to marigolds is, frankly, rabbits don't like marigolds, and so if you surround your entire garden with marigolds about 4 inches, 6 inches deep, you will greatly reduce the number of rabbits inside your garden. And that is true for both vegetables and for flowers. So something to consider. If you ever smelled a marigold, they're really, really pretty, but they are kind of stinky. The nice part about both, but especially the nice part about zinnias, is you can get 6-foot zinnias and you can get 4-inch zinnias. They have tons and tons of varieties that they bred into them. And somebody like me, I plant zinnias for pollinators, not for myself. I don't cut them. I don't take them into the house. And they tell you on the packet, this particular variety is really, really good, and that variety is not so good. So just consider what that is, what you want to do with that. I think we have something along the line of 300 species of bees just in Minnesota. Can you go figure? I had no idea. I thought we're limited to maybe 3, 4, 5 species of bees. No, 300 species of bees in Minnesota, some of which do not pollinate at all. Some of which, some of which are raptors. They eat other bees. They don't eat flowers or don't eat any nectar, whatever it is. So not all bees are pollinators. Not all insects are pollinators, but those that do pollinate are really quite wonderful. What one can do in one's garden is plant annuals like marigolds and zinnias and others. And if you really want to work at it, you can do annuals. I try to do only annual native to Minnesota flowers in my garden. I'm looking out the window right now. I think I planted 2 or 3 liatris 4 years. These are the tall, spiky things that are purple that bloom in early August. You know those things? Again, they're called prairie paintbrushes, purple gay feather, whatever it is. By the way, they are the only plant, one of the few plants that blooms from the top down, not from the bottom up. Kind of an interesting thing. So I planted about 3 of them a year ago, 2 years ago. I now have so many volunteers. A volunteer is a plant that shows up without any human being trying to make it come up. I have so many volunteers of purple day feather out there. I can hardly stand it. It's just great. It's taking over my garden. The garden rests in my window. For some reason or another, I don't know why. I can't explain why. Purple coneflower is really, really happy. It's a native pollinator plant, but it is crowding out the daisies and crowding out the somebody else. I forget who's out there and why. I don't know, but they're happy. So who cares, right? So after 4 or 5 years, one's garden tends to lend itself toward the plant that is happy. Yes, thank you. So that's happier. So anyway, that's what a pollinator is. And I think we should just need to discuss that. Oh, no, we need to discuss that a little bit before we went into a pollinator project. And it is exactly 5:30. So after my long diatribe, I apologize.
Can I say thank you, Greg? On the Shark Tank, there were pollinator garden people there, and they had sought out experts, and they were talking about building from scratch. And that was one of the things that our group actually talked about, is how to get educated. We're a virtual club. What can we bring to people more than a package of seeds that would pollinate, anyway, sorry, I didn't.
So anyway, this is what I was going to ask for. So thank you, Chris Ann, and thank you, Sandy. That was very helpful. We might want to discuss that further at an additional meeting. It is 5:31. So can we do the 4-way test together? Please unmute yourself. These are the things that we think, we say, and do. Number 1, is it the truth?
The truth.
Number 2, is it
Is it
fair
Fair
to all
to
concerned?
all concerned.
Number 3, would it
Would
build
goodwill and
and
better
friendships?
friendships.
Number 4, would it be
Will it
beneficial
be
to all
beneficial to
concerned?
all concerned?
To all
Thank you.
concerned.
Thank you, Chris Ann, for sharing this. And that's our meeting for today. Thank you, Chris Ann. Chris Ann, please stop recording.